And there's one thing we must not forget: the operator is the one who is in permanent daily contact exchange with the guest. So if we would claim to know anything better than the operator, that wouldn't be arrogant, that would be stupid. No, we don't. So we have to listen to them.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. How are you?
Doing well, doing really well. Matt, I feel like we've come across another milestone episode here on the Attraction Pros podcast.
Why would you say that?
Well, we crossed the 300 mark 10 episodes ago, which means that this is now episode 310. And that is a number that holds a very special place, at least in my heart.
So does that make this a Giga podcast?
I think that makes us a Giga podcast. Yeah.
And why would 310 hold such a special place in your heart?
Well, for those who don't know, first of all, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. Your first time tuning in, right? My favorite roller coaster of all time, I'm pretty vocal about this, is Millennium Force at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, which is 310 feet tall. And at the time that it opened, 23 years ago in the year 2000, it was the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world. Today, we are talking to Sascha Czibulka, the executive vice president of Intamin, who manufactured many rides, one of them being Millennium Force.
So let's nerd out just a second. What is it about that 310-foot monstrosity that keeps it in the top of your coaster rankings? Because you've ridden a lot of coasters, and it's near the top of mine, as we've talked about many times. Very, very close, always in contention. But what is it for you that keeps it at that spot on your list?
You know, it's a good question. And here's the thing. I could list off the stats and say it goes 93 miles an hour and the speed and the pacing, and there's no mid-course break, and it doesn't let up until it hits the brake run. And those are all true. I also think nostalgically for me personally, I almost felt like it was a turning point in my love of roller coasters when I rode it. When it opened, I was 13 years old in the year 2000. And I remember the months leading up to it. I was following the construction process, and it was there was so much of this anticipation building up. And Matt, I'm not going to lie, I was kind of scared. I had just started liking roller coasters maybe a year before that, and I really was working up and building this courage. So the year that it opened, I went to the park and I didn't ride it. Part of it because it had an extremely long wait. And I think the other part of it is I used that extremely long wait to justify, well, I guess I can't go on it, and I'll go on it next time, right? So the next year when I came back, I rode it not in its opening season, but in its second operating season. I think that it had built up even more of that anticipation and that excitement. And I think I waited a little bit less than the 3-hour wait that I saw the year prior. I think maybe it was 2 hours. It definitely wasn't a light wait, because it was still extremely popular, and in the year 2023 also is extremely popular. And I just remember riding it and thinking, like, this is it. Like, this is like, I've been following the process of the construction of it. It was still the tallest roller coaster in North America at that time, even though it didn't hold the tallest and fastest in the world for very long. It still was just one of the most iconic things I had ever seen. And when you look at it, you think, like, if I go on that, I'm gonna have a lot to brag about when I, get back to school, or, I see my friends again saying, like, I did that. So to answer your question, that's what I think of why is that my favorite ride? I think it's because the emotional impact it made on me 22 years ago.
Well, and I would say it's still making an emotional impact, or maybe it's better to say you have an emotional connection to it. And hearing that story, it's almost as if you've grown up with Millennium Force. And you mentioned something really interesting about how in the early days, there was those long lines and those long waits. And the last time I was at Cedar Point, the waits were just as long, which tells me that we're not alone in thinking that this ride is still iconic. This ride is still pretty extraordinary in the world of white knuckle rides. And that actually brings up a question that maybe I need to do a little research, but our guest, Sascha, talks about white knuckle rides. And it got me thinking, there's no coaster that's named the white knuckle or anything like that. Are you aware of any coaster that's named that?
We can very quickly pull up RCDB and determine it. Because if there's not, I think there should be.
Right.
We could find out. Should we do some live research here?
Let's do some live research.
Right. White knuckle. Nope.
No.
Nothing in the database was found for white knuckle.
So when you build your park, I think one of your coasters needs to be the white knuckle, because that's one thing that I thought was really fascinating about what Sascha talked about is there's those white knuckle rides. A Millennium Force would certainly be in that category where you're holding on for dear life, or if you're like you and I, our hands are up like this. But then you've got the family rides, and you've got all kinds of different attractions that appeal to different people. And I thought it was really fascinating how he talked about, from the very beginning of the conversation, we talked about persistence, and the way that Intamin kind of approaches their business is really being persistent in their pursuit of an amazing ride, an extraordinary ride that is built for that particular park, that's built for a specific demographic, that is supposed to, create certain emotions and certain feelings in people. But at the same time, you always have to think about the budget, the realities of it, the things that might get in the way, another structure or a landmass or those type of things. But it all comes down to, being persistent in that vision of looking to create something that's extraordinary and that will last.
Mm-hmm. You know what I think is cool too is kind of the way that Intamin has evolved over time with the new innovation and the development of their technology and their products, and you can see and feel that in real time. At the time of this recording, just a few days ago, I rode Demon Drop at Dorney Park, which I rode many times, kind of growing up when it was located at Cedar Point, and then the next morning I rode King Dakar and El Toro, which you can really see kind of this passage of time of they've gone from this to that, and they can still embrace the nostalgia and the original technology, which is actually still pretty impressive on Demon Drop. And then you got King Dakar, the tallest roller coaster in the world, the hydraulic launch coaster, and El Toro, wooden coaster, and being able to see just how much they've done and I would say accomplished in the industry, and just over the last several decades.
Well, and one thing that ties each of those three attractions together, and that Sascha goes into some detail about, is safety. Right? They approach everything with safety as the first thing. And he even said there could get to a point in a project where they said, we can't do this. Like, we can't accomplish this in a safe way, so we're not going to do it. But their persistence kicks in and says, we can do it differently. We can make this compromise or this change, and then we can bring that to life. So I thought it was really interesting to hear him talk about how safety is really what starts everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then even tying in just kind of I would say the innovation brought up by challenges, whether it's from safety or external factors, we get to hear the story of how the hydraulic launch coaster came to be. And we know that, Accelerator, well, you and I know at least that Accelerator was the first one at Knott's Berry Farm in the early 2000s. And I think 2002 it was. That was initially supposed to be a linear motor launch, and they ran into an issue and had to change the launch, and that's how they came up with this. So what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, and and they're no strangers to that. So should we sit upright, hold on tight, and get to this interview with Sascha Czibulka?
Let's get ready for some airtime.
All right.
Hello, Sascha. Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. How you doing today?
Hello, Matt. Hello, Josh. I'm doing fine. Excellent, actually.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're so excited to jump into this conversation. First of all, can you give us kind of a background about your history and a little bit about what you do at Intamin?
Absolutely. My background, I was born and raised in Vienna, Austria. I graduated from the University of Economics and Business Administration with a master's degree in Vienna. And shortly before I left university, I actually started my professional career in our industry. So I haven't done any proper job before that. I started with Huss Rides. They were looking at, in those days, for someone taking care of their North and South American sales efforts. And I wanted to get out of dusty Vienna and see the world. So I thought, why not? And then the interesting thing is, until that time, I had very little connection to the amusement and theme park industry. I mean, there's one pretty renowned park in Vienna, the Prater. And then on my first trip to the States after high school, I've been to Disneyland and to Universal Studios in LA, and that was it. So I joined Huss, and as green as one can be behind the ears, and I happened to be at the right time, at the right place, and obviously, also hard work and a lot of luck. It was fun, excitement, and I was climbing up the career ladder. And I think it was a good 3 years after I started when they offered me the position of heading sales and marketing worldwide. And, I was below 30. So, I mean, young, green, fresh, and totally excited. So I took up that responsibility. And after almost 5 years, I felt a little bit homesick. And it was the time when the dot-com bubble was growing. And a friend of mine had an idea to set up a startup business, and that sounded pretty exciting. So I decided to leave Huss, handed in my resignation, started to turn down things in Germany. And then something strange or weird, or however you want to put it, happened. Exactly one day after I resigned, and I had my contract was still running, so I had another 6 months to go, and we agreed on purest confidentiality for various reasons and so on. But exactly one day later, Intamin called, and they said, "I'd like to talk to you," and I felt extremely honored. I mean, if you think about it, the big Intamin is reaching out to you, and and they said they could see me working with Intamin, and I was extremely honored, but I kindly and respectfully turned the offer down because I wanted to go back, and then one of Intamin's cornerstone characteristics, if you so want, popped up: persistence. They kept on calling. And then they said, "You know what? Come to our headquarters in Liechtenstein, have a look at everything." And so I finally gave in and said, "Okay, you can have a look." And it was a beautiful winter day in January. Snow all over, no clouds in the sky, and I realized, hey, this is just 45 minutes away from my favorite ski resort, and skiing already at those days was one of my biggest passions. And so I was thinking back and forth, said, "You know what? Vienna can wait. let's do that for a year, two, and then I can go back. Well, those 2 years turned out to be very long 2 years. That was 23 years, a little bit more than 23 years ago. And I started with Intamin. The official terminology was managing director. Sounds much more than it actually was. I was basically, especially in the beginning, helping in sales and marketing efforts, administrational stuff like insurance, patent law, legal stuff. And then as time evolved, I was focusing more and more on business development, sales, marketing, and the boring legal stuff. And that's what I'm still doing today. And which involves a lot of traveling, obviously, which I still like. And then because it's also part of my professional career, I have been, pretty early on involved with IAAPA. And I've been a member of various committees, at some time also chaired committees on the M&S side, the European M&S subcommittee, the Global Manufacturing Suppliers Committee. I had the honor to serve on the Executive Finance Committee of IAAPA, and also had 2 terms on the board of directors. And I'm still serving at the moment on the European Advisory Committee. And and that obviously also is an important part of my professional career.
So Sascha, over the last 23 years with Intamin, I can say as a consumer, I've been able to see a lot of the product that Intamin has put out, and been able to see the evolution just from, I would say, a spectator. Can you talk about perhaps what that's been like just over the course of the last 2+ decades of Intamin's continued, I would say, evolution and also innovation of being cutting edge in the industry?
It still is an exciting journey, especially in this context. When I joined Intamin, the only thing I had reasonably well knowledge was, if you so want, round rides. I mean, basically what the portfolio of Huss Rides. But I had no clue of roller coasters. I had no knowledge of water rides, giant wheels, all kind of free fall towers, and all the technology that stands behind it. And what very, very soon overwhelmed me was the innovation of the company, and constantly pushing the envelope. And how, no matter how crazy the idea sounds, whether it's brought to Intamin or someone within the company comes up with the idea, there's always an open ear, and you will never hear, no, cannot be done. And now 23 years is a reasonably long time. And still today, this attitude has not changed at all. And that is, I think, one of the unique things that makes Intamin. What is also cannot be taken for granted, that it's now the 3rd generation. It's family business, founded by 3 individuals. 2 of them were brothers, Robert and Reinhold Spieldiener. And Patrick, who is Reinhold's son, he's running the company for a number of decades now. And his 2 sons, Lucas and Kevin, started a couple of years ago with Intamin. So it is family business, and what they all have in common is to still go for it. And that is, like I said, not granted at all. You cannot take that for granted. But yeah, that's the fantastic thing, and that makes Intamin unique.
Sascha, I love
everything that comes with it. I mean, the innovation strength. I mean, quite a number of technologies have been either invented or developed to maturity by Intamin, and continues to be the case. So, yep.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing that philosophy that you won't say no. You'll figure out how to make it work, right? And that goes back to persistence, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
One of the things I'm curious about is, Josh and I have talked to a lot of people, on the podcast and just in general about safety from, the operator's perspective, and what we see when, after a ride is installed and we understand what those safety procedures are and how that, things are put in place for the guest safety. And we all know that safety is the number one factor of our industry. But I'm curious how that plays into the design process. And when somebody does come with a wild, crazy, wacky idea, at some point you say, okay, we can do this, but we also have to make it safe. So I'm curious what those conversations and that philosophy looks like.
Well, like you just said, Matt, safety is that's where everything starts with. And this counts for the operators, and that also counts for the manufacturing suppliers. I mean, that's the headline of everything we do. So we are not questioning how does it need to be done so that it's safe. It's taken as granted that whatever we do, it has to be safe. And if there is an idea and we realize it could be physically or technically done, but not safely, then we don't touch it. And then you will hear, well, unfortunately, in this configuration, it's not possible. However, if we amend this, change that, then eventually it could do. So it starts with safety. That's the cornerstone of everything we do. And what is obviously pretty helpful nowadays are the available technologies. Or I would actually start with the norms and standards we have in place. I mean, in Europe, we have the European norm 13814, in the US, ASTM, and those two actually are intertwined. In China, we have the GB norms, in Australia, and so on and so on. There are differences, but what they all have in common is to make the rides absolutely safe. And we have to follow with whatever we do. It starts with the design and engineering. We have to follow those norms. It continues with the manufacturing process, then and with the installation and then putting into operation and so on. Then there are third-party inspection bodies. For instance, in Europe and especially in Germany, TÜV is very well known, and they are experienced. They look at it, if you so want, from the outside, and they make sure that whatever we do is in accordance with the existing and applicable norms and standards, also meets their requirements. Then the software, when it comes to designing and engineering a ride. I can give you at least an indirect example. 10, 15 years ago, when we have created a layout. So a client came to us and said, look, this is the available area. I saw this coaster, looks nice. Can you do something similar here at my park? And then considering the restraints or the situation, the particular situation of that site, we came up with a layout. And then obviously the question was, well, how fast is the train here at that spot? What G-forces are the passengers experiencing here, and so on? And obviously we had some numbers. And then in the best case, the client said, yes, we have a deal, go ahead, build, design and build that coaster. So then you do all the engineering, and then you have the end result. And then when you compare it with your initial layout or shot and the end result, I would say the difference was somewhere, yeah, could have been even up to 10%. Normally the design attempt or the targets were a little bit too optimistic, because then came the norm, the experience, you cannot go with that speed into that curve, you need to bank a little bit more, and. Today, when we do a layout, and we call it internally a sales layout, which means there are not detailed dynamic and static calculations done, but it is still quite an effort where special software engineering skills and then go into. And the result of that first shot, if you so want, compared to the end result, is an accuracy of 99 point, and now we can argue about the number behind the dot. So yeah, it is almost as built, which is amazing, and only possible because of the available technology, in that case, software. And the same goes for all the processes when it comes to the detailed design and engineering, to the manufacturing. I mean, with all the automated processes, and also with all the checks and everything you do during the manufacturing, the degree of safety is exceptionally high. And for everything we do, every kind of rides, when we start the execution process, the first thing we do with all involved parties, sitting down and do a risk assessment. And think of the impossible, if you so want, and then how to mitigate it. Obviously, that also, the more experience you have, the better is the end result. And we are fortunate that we do have a lot of experience in-house. With every ride we hand over, we are absolutely convinced about the safety, and that what we have done is to our best knowledge and based on our experience and everything. Plus, and that's important, all the other parties involved, making sure that this is the case. With the operator, who also looks into that process in most of the cases, or hires a third party to look over our shoulders, if you so want. So under normal circumstances, there's quite a huge effort to guarantee safety, whereas, I mean, we cannot guarantee 100%, as we all know. It's it's a daily effort.
This is so
it answered your question to some extent, at least.
Oh, it did, absolutely.
And thank you for sharing kind of how safety goes into. I feel like we just got a full overview of the planning process, everything from the sales layout and then into the development and then even into the operation. So thanks so much for giving that overview. You talked about kind of the experience of your team and the talent that you have in-house. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who probably dream of being a roller coaster designer or an engineer or in marketing for roller coasters and rides and for the industry. And would love to know what do you look for when bringing on talent to the Intamin team?
Passion. I think that's something really, really, really important. Obviously, with the different disciplines, different skills are required. So, for instance, to design a roller coaster, you better have an engineering background. So mechanical engineering is certainly a good thing. Sales marketing, for instance, I'm a good example that also a non-engineer can survive in this environment. So at the end, we at Intamin, we are quite engineering driven, and so that is certainly a good thing. But being not an engineer is not excluding, obviously. Another thing which we look for is the passion comes a little bit hand in hand, at least that from my perspective, with the willingness to go the extra mile because of the passion for our industry. And you came up with the example of designing roller coaster. Yeah? So let's stay there, but that counts for every type of ride and or attraction. And then what we also, in some cases at least, look for is experience. And that's the challenging stuff, because on one end, you want to get new talents and help them developing and bring them up. At the same time, you have work to get done. And this in a rather short time. Time is basically the factor, besides too low budgets, we're always fighting against. They're finding the right balance. But looking at the various departments, we have at our headquarters in Liechtenstein, where we are quite a bit over 100 people, we have quite a high number of young people, I have to say. So when I go to the cafeteria, I feel like someone has to bring me the wheelchair, because such old people need to be taken care of. And yeah, so that's basically, I'm repeating, passion is really something important. So whoever is listening and connected to our industry in what way ever, that's a good starting point.
Absolutely. Passion is certainly something that Josh and I feel for the industry, and obviously you do too. It's why we started this podcast, but there's something on the kind of enthusiast side that we also wanted to ask. Speaking of passion, Josh and I have passionate conversations about our favorite roller coasters, and one of them that always comes up is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. And, it sounds like that was right around the time that you joined Intamin about 23 years ago when that coaster was built, but still such an amazing ride, such a favorite of so many people. And I'm just curious, like, can you imagine when you put something out there that 23 years later, 25 years later, that it's still going to be such a favorite? And, kind of what is that like from a manufacturing standpoint?
Well, obviously you dream of that. Yeah. And yeah, even at running risk, that sounds a little bit arrogant, and actually it does. But I would say, yes, that's how we approach every project. That is basically, if you want, that's the passion part of our roller coaster design department. The vast majority of the engineers there are, I don't like the term that much, but nothing else comes to my mind now, nerds, in the most positive and best sense of the word. And for them, it is always, they don't obviously care that much about budget restraints or site restraints. They want to always come up with a fantastic result, a fantastic coaster. So, and then reality kicks in. Almost every layout we do is a compromise. And that compromise, or the reasons for that compromise, can be almost everything you can think of. It can start with the sites, that there are existing structures which have to be considered, and which then force you to make movements in course of the track which you normally would not do, and they have an impact. And then in some cases you actually make an advantage out of that. In some cases, they restrain you. Then you may have restrictions by the defined target group. Obviously, Millennium Force is a thrill. It's a white knuckle coaster. If you are targeting for the family audience, that obviously results in totally different parameters you need to consider, and the result, which does not necessarily mean that all family coasters are boring. I can give you a couple of examples where it's the total opposite. One of them actually is one of my favorites. And then, last but not least, if you so want, also to be mentioned is budget. Sometimes also the available budget puts restraints on you. And we must never forget, every attraction that is put into operation better makes economical sense for the operator, because that's the basis for the next investment. And if that does not work, the whole thing gets cracks. And yeah. So coming back to your question, yes, that's the dream, or actually more dream, our demand we always have. And in quite a number of cases, we succeeded, I think.
I have a follow-up question to that, because not only is Millennium Force my #1 favorite roller coaster, and I'm not just saying that, Matt can back me up on that I've said it many times, is for me, that was actually where I started my career. I was a ride operator at Cedar Point and was able to spend 2 summers at Millennium Force. And for me personally, I always say that my favorite position to work on that ride was the unload dispatch, because I was just as the train was coming back into the station, you could see a level of, disoriented kind of, views and people trying to, gain their composure back, and being able to, ask them, saying, "Welcome back. How was that ride?" And hearing very enthusiastic responses. The question I have from that is, for you, what do you look for when you are visiting parks? Are you standing there at the exit? Are you getting the reactions, and what does it mean for you of being able to see the final product in place? Because the guest doesn't see everything that you just talked about over the last 15 to 20 minutes, all of the safety that goes into it, and the layout and the budget and the constraints and the parameters and the engineering. They just wait in line, they ride the ride, and would love to know, as far as what you're seeing from your lens when you're standing at the exit and you're watching people get off.
That's a really good question. Now, before I put myself into that location to get an idea, or actually more than an idea of the guest feedback, and that's what counts at the end of the day. I obviously ride it myself, and there you do get a first impression, but it's still your own opinion, and which is influenced by many factors. So despite that, I hate opening days and press days, because that's normally when things go wrong, in the sense of, everyone's looking at it. You eventually did not have enough time and days to do all the tests you wanted to. You have this opening day deadline, and. But in most cases, those days turn out to be really nice ones. And the last one I attended is a couple of weeks ago. I think, what is it? Good 2 months in Madrid at Parque Warner, for the official opening for Batman, the new Batman coaster, the Batman Gotham City Escape. And well, the only place to be is at the exit of the station when the passengers get off, and then eventually see how many are going, or actually running back to the entry of the queue line. And that's when you get the first good feeling of whether you succeeded and whether you have a success product, coaster in that case, or if it's only okay or whatever. And my target, and I push for that to quite an extent, within Intamin, and it is the company's target, and not because it's mine, it's the other way around. Design a coaster that the passenger can only be torn out of the seat after the train returned to the station, because he wants to do it instantly again and again and again. And then you know you have a winner. Because, I mean, let's face it, every new ride will attract the audience at the beginning, in the first season. But the success is defined by the years to come and how popular the attraction remains to be over many, many years. And that's where, that's my definition for a successful and good, really good coaster. And Millennium Force definitely is such a coaster.
Absolutely. And just to tie into some of the passion and maybe nerddom, this will be episode 310. And that this was on purpose to interview you for episode 310. So thank you for being available for that. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about the guests that you just mentioned, the guests that want to stay in the seat, the guests that really tell us if we've got a successful product or not. Have you seen their appetite change? I mean, certainly they're looking for bigger and bigger thrills, but also you mentioned the family, and maybe they don't want to get on a Millennium Force or something that goes 90-something miles an hour. So have you noticed the appetite changing, or is it kind of the same, just the thrills are getting bigger? Or I'm just curious kind of what you all are seeing from the demographic standpoint.
I think that the appetite has not been changing. I mean, that's a constant development and reevaluation, and per definition, it is changing. It is constantly changing, and it's adapting, and we have to keep this in mind. And with what we do, have to adapt to. In some cases, we initiate this changing taste, if you so want, with developing new or applying technologies to our products which have not been applied before, or even develop them by ourselves, and because that's the same that happens on the same base and same level, that operators, and there's one thing we must not forget: the operator is the one who is in permanent daily contact exchange with the guest. So if we would claim to know anything better than the operator, that wouldn't be arrogant, that would be stupid. No, we don't. So we have to listen to them and find out what do they need, what are the trends they are seeing, and be a partner when it comes to the execution of the right product, right if you so want, to meet that changing demand and taste. But to give you one example, where we have been from very, very early on involved in the development launch coasters, which are now for all segments. So it's no longer only the high-end, high-thrill, white-knuckle type of coasters. I would say 90% of the family coasters we do nowadays, and we do quite a bit, they just are not so marketing attractive, if you so want, than the big ones. But you would be overwhelmed if you see how many family coasters we're working on. The vast majority are launch coasters, obviously with much lower G-forces and acceleration rates. So family friendly. We call them actually family thrill coasters, because we also want to make sure that enthusiasts like you get off and say, hey, that was much better than I expected. And so the launch technology, which Intamin played from the very beginning a very vital role, It started with the linear induction motors in the 90s. Then I don't know, maybe gets too long, but I try to keep it short. The next development were the hydraulic catapults, hydraulic launch coasters. And this happened because of not so nice situation in California in the early 2000s. We had contracted with Cedar Fair a linear motor launch coaster for Knott's Berry Farm. And then there was this, I think it was Enron, this scandal in California in particular, which led to power shutdowns and outages, and the county withdraw the permission for that launch coaster because of the high energy consumption. Or actually the energy consumption is not that high, it's the peak power, which for a very short time, you need a few megawatts. And in those days you did. And so they revoked the permission, and Knott's came to us and said, hey, you probably heard of that. We do have a problem, but don't worry. We still want the launch coaster. We're still committed to the opening date. You just have to come up with another technology. And this is how the hydraulic catapult was born, which I think it was, over 20 launch coasters based on this technology. We then have executed over the years the Top Thrill Dragster, King Dakar, and the Formula Rossa, which still today holds the world record for the fastest coaster on Earth. And then every technology has its pros and cons. And obviously, the hydraulic system is maintenance intensive. At the same time, the linear motor technology continued to develop, power efficiency increased, and at some point, it was when it came to launch coasters, the technology of choice. And we then have developed our own LSM, linear synchronous motor propulsion system, which is the most powerful on the market, and because that's helpful when you want to go for it, obviously. And over the last, 10 years, to be honest, I don't know the exact number, but a couple of dozen linear motor-based coasters we brought to life, and the count continues. So, like your podcast.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. I did not know that story with Knott's and how the hydraulic launch came to be. So thank you so much for sharing that story. Sascha, we have a few minutes left here, but would love to know what's the best professional advice you've ever gotten?
That's a tough one. And why tough? Because many of those advices are so, common sense. And then I heard that about 500,000 times before, and how boring. But I was kind of looking back to the advices I got over the years, or the experiences I made. And eventually, if someone would have given me this particular advice, it would have made my, and especially other people's life easier. One advice, for instance, would be yourself. In the sense of, don't pretend to be someone else. At the end, it will be artificial, and your counterparts realize that. At the same time, show respect to others. Since I'm working in sales, I always try, I not always succeed, but I always try to put myself in the client's position when we are, for instance, in negotiations, or when we are in determining a layout and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you get a different perspective. And then you go back to yours. And then I found out it's considerably easier to come to results which are okay for both if you do that, and not only go your way and push your thing through, which you say, That's the only way. Yeah, it goes a little bit hand in hand with treat others the same way you want to be treated. Again, very general, heard it 50 times. And probably the last one, which I should have gotten earlier, listen.
I was just listening to see if you were going to say something else. That's a great one. And you're right. Those are things that we've probably heard a lot from our parents, from other leaders, but they may be simple to say, but not easy to execute. And I think that's why they keep coming up as great pieces of advice. So thank you very much for sharing all those, Sascha. This has been a fantastic and fascinating conversation. Sascha, if people wanted to learn more about Intamin or get in touch with you, where would you send them?
Learn about Intamin, I would send them to our website. That's intamin.com. If for whatever reason they want to get in touch with me, they find me on LinkedIn. They can send me an email. It's Sascha.Czibulka, and good luck by spelling that correctly, at intamin.com. Yeah, that's how to get in touch and hold of Intamin and eventually myself.
Excellent. Well, we'll put those in the show notes, make it easy to click so they won't have to worry about trying to spell it.
That's highly recommended.
Sascha, I echo Mac's comment. This has just been a fantastic conversation. We're so thankful to have the opportunity to chat with you today. So thank you again so much for joining us. And for everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.